Hi, I'm Maya Chin, and this is the story of how my small family restaurant became one of the most exclusive dining spots in New York City, all because my in-laws couldn't resist tearing me down one last time. Cooking has always been my passion. Growing up in a modest Chinese-American household, I spent countless hours in our tiny kitchen, learning traditional recipes from my grandmother while adding my own contemporary twists. My parents wanted me to pursue a respectable career in medicine or law, but my heart belonged to the culinary arts. That's how I met James, my husband. He was a regular at the small Asian fusion restaurant where I worked as a sous chef. He'd come in 3 times a week, always ordering something different, always asking to compliment the chef. When we finally met, the connection was instant. He loved my innovative takes on traditional dishes, and I loved his genuine appreciation for culinary creativity. What I didn't love was his family. The Whittakers were old money, with a lineage that apparently traced back to the Mayflower, something his mother, Elizabeth, mentioned at every possible opportunity. His father, Richard, was a real estate mogul who owned half the commercial properties in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And his sister, Victoria, was a social media influencer who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow had 3 million followers on Instagram. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear I wasn't their kind of people. A chef? Elizabeth had said, her voice dripping with disdain. How quaint. But James stood by me, and we got married despite their objections. I thought time would heal the rift, that proving myself as a loving wife would eventually win them over. I was wrong. 5 years into our marriage, I decided to pursue my dream. With our savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother, I opened Fusion Garden, a cozy restaurant that blended traditional Asian cuisine with modern American influences. James supported me completely, even though it meant living on a tighter budget while the restaurant found its footing. The first year was tough, as it is for any new restaurant. We had good days and bad days, but slowly, we were building a loyal customer base. Food critics were starting to take notice, and our weekend reservations were usually booked solid. It wasn't a Michelin star establishment, but it was mine, and I was proud of what we were creating. Then came last year's Thanksgiving. The Whittakers insisted on hosting the entire extended family, including me and James. Usually, I tried to avoid these gatherings, but James convinced me it would be good for business networking. Dad's friends are always looking for new places to host their business dinners, he said optimistically. I should have trusted my instincts. The evening started with the usual subtle jabs. Elizabeth commented on my simple dress, which cost 3 months of profits. Victoria asking if I needed recommendations for a good plastic surgeon. She knew a great one who fixed her nose. And Richard barely acknowledging my existence. But it was during dinner that everything fell apart. So Maya, Elizabeth started, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance. James tells me you're little. The restaurant is still operating. How surprising. I felt James tense beside me. Yes, we're doing quite well, actually. Our weekend reservations are usually. Oh, darling. Victoria cut in, scrolling through her phone. I saw your reviews online. 3 stars? That's barely passing, isn't it? Actually, 3 stars on Michelin is. I tried to explain, but Richard interrupted. Let's be honest here, he said, putting down his fork with a loud clunk that silenced the table. We've all eaten there. The food is mediocre at best. No innovation, no style, just worthless food from a worthless chef who clearly doesn't understand fine dining. The table fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, some with pity, others with poorly concealed amusement. "Dad," James started, but I placed my hand on his arm. "No, Richard's entitled to his opinion," I said quietly, standing up. "Though I find it interesting that someone who thinks my food is worthless has reserved a table at Fusion Garden 6 times in the past month under different names." Elizabeth's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "What's wrong, Elizabeth? Didn't think I'd recognize your husband when he came in wearing different suits, sitting at corner tables, taking detailed notes? Or did you think I wouldn't notice Victoria's anonymous food blogger friends coming in with their cameras?" Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of red. "We were merely conducting market research. The property your restaurant sits on is owned by the Chang Family Trust. I finished for him, my grandmother's family. Not part of your real estate empire, and not for sale." The silence that followed was deafening. "Now, if you'll excuse me," I continued, placing my napkin on the table, "I have a restaurant to run. A worthless one, apparently, but it's mine." I walked out of that dining room with my head held high, ignoring Elizabeth's spluttering and Victoria's furious typing on her phone. James followed me to the car, apologizing profusely, but I barely heard him. Because during those painful minutes at the Whitaker family table, a plan had started forming in my mind. A plan that would take 6 months to execute, would cost me every favor I'd ever earned in the culinary world, and would ultimately change everything. They thought my food was worthless. Fine. They wanted to conduct market research. Perfect. They didn't think I understood fine dining. Oh, they had no idea what I was capable of. That night, as James slept, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my old mentor from culinary school, now a celebrated chef in Paris. The second was to a restaurant designer who owed me a favor. And the third was to a certain celebrity chef known for transforming restaurants. By morning, Operation Restaurant Revolution was in motion. The next 6 months would test everything I knew about cooking, business, and revenge. And the best part, the Whitakers would never see it coming. The next morning, I arrived at Fusion Garden earlier than usual. My staff could sense something had changed. There was a new energy in my movements, a spark in my eyes that hadn't been there before. They'd learn why soon enough. "Team meeting in 10 minutes," I announced, tying my apron with practiced precision. "Everyone needs to be there." And I mean everyone. As my staff gathered in the dining room, servers, line cooks, dishwashers, hosts, I took a deep breath and shared my vision. Over the next 6 months, we would transform Fusion Garden into something unprecedented in New York's culinary scene. But I needed their complete dedication and discretion. "What I'm proposing will be the hardest work you've ever done," I told them frankly. "Double shifts, late nights, endless practice. Some of you might want to leave, and I'll write glowing recommendations if you do. But if you stay," I smiled, "you'll be part of culinary history." To my amazement, not a single person left. They'd seen how I treated my staff, like family, better than my actual in-laws had ever treated me. They trusted me, and that trust was about to pay off. The next few months were a blur of activity, all conducted under absolute secrecy. The restaurant designer I'd called, Marcus, worked after hours, transforming our cozy dining room into something spectacular. We replaced every table, chair, and light fixture. The walls were redone in hand-painted murals depicting the fusion of Eastern and Western culinary traditions. The kitchen was completely reorganized and equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. My old mentor, Chef Jacques, flew in from Paris twice a month to help refine our techniques and train my staff. Together, we revolutionized every recipe on the menu, elevating each dish while maintaining the soul of the original concept. We weren't just making food, we were creating edible art. But the real game changer was my third call from that night, to Gordon Ramsay's team. I'd met Gordon briefly during my culinary school days, and he remembered my innovative dessert fusion that won a national competition. When I explained my situation and my vision, he was intrigued enough to get involved. The plan was simple but ambitious. Gordon would feature Fusion Garden in a special episode of his new streaming series about revolutionary restaurants. But first, we had to become revolutionary. For 6 months, we operated on 2 tracks. During regular hours, we maintained our usual service, though with gradually increasing prices and limited availability of reservations. Richard continued his undercover visits, taking notes and looking smug. Victoria's blogger friends kept coming in, posting lukewarm reviews about our decent but uninspired offerings. But after hours, we were building something extraordinary. My staff trained relentlessly. Every dish was deconstructed and rebuilt. Every service pattern was choreographed to perfection. We weren't just preparing food, we were creating an experience. James watched all this with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" he'd ask, seeing me return home exhausted at 3 a.m. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "This isn't about proving something," I'd reply. "This is about becoming something." Finally, after 6 months of preparation, we were ready. The restaurant closed for 2 weeks for renovations. Victoria immediately posted about how this was the beginning of the end for Fusion Garden. Richard was overheard at his country club betting on how long before we went bankrupt. Perfect. The night of our reopening, I made sure the Whittakers received a special invitation. Elizabeth's RSVP came back with a note about how they were so concerned about our struggles and would of course support family in difficult times. They arrived as a group: Richard, Elizabeth, Victoria, and several of their society friends. James met them at the door, playing his part perfectly. "Maya's in the kitchen," he said, sounding worried. "She's been acting strange lately." They sat at the best table, already smirking, ready to witness what they assumed would be my humiliation. Then the show began. The new Fusion Garden was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Each dish was a theatrical presentation of flavor and technique. Dim sum that levitated on magnetic plates. Soup served in hand-blown glass spheres that dissolved when touched. Traditional Chinese dishes deconstructed and rebuilt with molecular gastronomy techniques. And in the middle of service, right on cue, Gordon Ramsay walked into the kitchen. The dining room went silent as he emerged a few minutes later, sampling dishes, nodding approvingly. Camera crews captured everything, including the Whittakers' increasingly pale faces. "This," Gordon announced to the cameras, "is the future of fusion cuisine. Chef Maya has created something extraordinary here. Michelin should be calling any day now." Elizabeth's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Victoria's phone livestream suddenly went quiet. Richard's face had turned that interesting shade of red again. Then I emerged from the kitchen, no longer in chef's whites, but in a designer dress, followed by some of the most renowned food critics in New York. They'd all been there incognito, scattered throughout the dining room. "The property offers are no longer necessary, Richard," I said quietly, stopping at their table. "Fusion Garden isn't for sale. In fact, we're expanding. That empty building next door, the one you've been trying to buy for years. I closed on it this morning. We're opening a culinary school. You can't. Richard sputtered. Oh, and Elizabeth? I continued. Those reservations you've been trying to make under different names. We're booked solid for the next year. But don't worry, I've saved a permanent table for my family. I smiled sweetly. Right next to the kitchen, where you can smell everything, but taste like anything. The episode aired 3 months later. Fusion Garden became the hottest reservation in New York overnight. We earned our first Michelin star within 6 months, with rumors of a second on the way. The culinary school opened, focusing on fusion cuisine and innovative techniques. The Whittakers? They still come in sometimes, sitting at their assigned table by the kitchen, watching as I live my dream. Victoria's followers love her posts about her talented sister-in-law. Elizabeth brags at her social clubs about how she always saw my potential. Richard even offered to invest in my next venture. I declined, of course. Some things, like self-respect and true passion, are worth more than money or social status. My grandmother taught me that, along with her recipes that started this whole journey. James and I are expecting our first child now. Yesterday, I felt the baby kick while I was developing a new dessert menu. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Remember this, little one. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right." The kitchen timer dings, and I have to go. There's a new fusion dish I'm working on, combining my grandmother's secret Xiao Longbao recipe with a French soufflé technique. The critics will love it. But more importantly, I love it. And in the end, that's what makes anything truly worthless or priceless, not what others say about it, but what you know it's worth. As I head back to my kitchen, I pass the Whittakers' table. It's empty tonight, but the reservation sign is still there, a small reminder of how far I've come. Some might call it petty, keeping that table as a monument to their disdain. I call it seasoning, that extra pinch of satisfaction that makes success taste even sweeter.